some people still say the old design was better.
Oh, God. Well, so is Rybash as a mod manager, right?
Why the f*** are you using Rybash?
Okay, and we've got Pickysaurus joining us right now. How you doing, Picky?
Hey, I'm good. How are you?
Oh, doing well, doing well. It's good to hear from you.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me.
Welcome to the SirJesto Podcast. Tell the listeners a little bit about yourself and how you got into modding.
So my real name's Mike, which you may see on my little avatar. I'm 30 years old and I live in England. Modding-wise, I mean, I've always tinkered with games, but I would say the first games I seriously modded were Command and Conquer Generals and 0 Hour. It just bothered me that the game didn't have a European faction, so the closest I had was the Americans, which I didn't really like the way they played.
Well, that's okay. I'm Canadian, so that doesn't bother me.
Yeah, well, there isn't a Canadian faction either, I'm afraid.
No, that's unfortunate.
But I started playing this mod called Rise of the Reds for General 0 Hour, which adds both a European and Russian faction, and that's probably the thing that got me into modding at the very beginning. I've since moved on to other games like Skyrim, Subnautica, a little bit of Stardew Valley, but the game just didn't really grab me, and a couple of others on the side.
Subnautica, that's an interesting game.
Yeah, I tend not to be I don't really like the open-ended survival crafting-y games, just because even though I work in games, I feel like I don't want to be playing a game that has no ending, and Subnautica is one of those games where it actually has a story for you to follow, albeit loosely. And it has an ending, which is what I wanted. I wanted to play it for 20 hours, 30 hours, however long I spent on it, and complete it. And that's what I did.
Great. Yeah, it's a little bit like Lost. It eventually ends.
Yeah, but much more satisfying than that one.
What I think a lot of people might want to know is how you got your job at Nexus Mods.
So when I started modding Skyrim, which is probably the game I've modded most extensively, I obviously joined Nexus Mods because basically all the mods are on there. Mm-hmm. And I was involved in the community. I used to, comment on threads. I helped Ice Cream Assassin out with Legacy of the Dragonborn before I actually started modding it. And when Nexus Mods put an advert up in their site news to say, hey, we're looking for community managers, I was in a really rubbish retail job. And to the point where I was having some mental health problems, I was so miserable. So I thought, you know what, screw it. I'm just going to put an application in. And I was very surprised when I got the call. But I haven't looked back. I think retail should be like national service. I think everyone should do a little bit of that.
Just to know that you don't want to be in retail. So what was the interview process like?
So it was very chill. We had a little... So I spoke to Sir Salami, or Dave, who was the community manager at the time. And we had a little chat about what it was like working for Nexus, what the expectations were, that kind of thing. And then there was a kind of assessment where we would be given a list of scenarios and we would have to explain how we would respond to them. There would be things like an author who is normally a positive influence on the community has suddenly started posting very aggressive remarks. What do you do, kind of thing. So we had to respond to that sort of thing. There was also bits in there about contacting game developers or mediating permission disputes, that kind of stuff. Basically all the stuff moderators do. Following that, I had an in-person interview in the Exeter office, which was crazy because, like a lot of people, I expected Nexus to be quite a big company, but there were 4 guys in a room when I got there, and that was it at the time. A bit bigger than that now, but Yeah, had a good chat with Robin. He's Dark One. He's the site owner.
Right.
And yeah, that's the rest is history, as they say.
So, any of those scenarios did SirJesto come up as an example of someone you'd have to discipline?
That's the trick question. That's the hard one.
All right. On the topic of the Nexus office, you said it's a more comfortable, smaller environment. Is it still that way?
Yeah. So it's still. I find when I talk to people about Nexus Mods, they either assume that we're this massive, like, multinational corporation, or they assume the opposite. They assume we're 4 guys working out of Robin's garage.
It's somewhere in the middle, I take it.
So there's around. I mean, the number's a bit in flux because we're hiring at the moment, but there's about 20 people now. So it's grown exponentially since I've been there, and we've recently, well, in the last 2 years, we've moved into a larger office space, which is really cool.
Cool. A little more modern, I imagine.
Yeah, everything's very chic and modern, and we have decent PC hardware as part of the job because we need to be able to load the games. So that's a benefit.
Absolutely. Is there any kind of goofy, funny shit that goes on in the background that our listeners might find amusing?
I mean,
go on at Nexus Mods?
we do make our own fun in a way. The one that stands out to me is my fellow community manager, Stefan, known as Big Biscuit on the site. He is usually the one who arranges when we go on our lunch break. And it effectively became known as the town train. And you have to get on the town train if you want to go into town. And one of the silly little in-jokes, I just bought him a wooden train whistle, and sometimes he'll blow the whistle to let us know it's time to go to town.
It's like dinging the triangle or whatever back in the old Western days. Or come and get it for dinner time. Yeah. So you're still a community manager, or are you? Is your role different now?
So yeah, I'm still a community manager. If you want to be really fancy, I'm senior community manager because we now have a junior community manager. But I mean, I don't really care too much about titles. So yeah, so I'm still considered community manager, which is we're responsible for essentially responding to user reports and emails, assisting with site issues. We help the developers out with we're basically the QA department at the moment. So before things get sent out to you guys and the users, we have to test them to make sure they actually do what they're meant to do.
Right. There's something we're going to get into in a little bit regarding that.
Okie dokie.
I'm looking forward to that. So how many? Let's say a user has an issue. How many of these kind of issues do you get, like say on a daily basis, or like potential problems?
So I mean, there's a few different channels. There's our email inbox. There's the reports through the website. There's our PMs and stuff like that. So I would say 100 is probably a normal day in terms of issues. It might even be more than that, but we get a lot of essentially junk through some of the reporting channels, like spam email and reports that don't actually describe the problem and that kind of thing. So,
right. Some bugs that aren't bugs. That's why we turn off the bugs tab, right? Gotcha. So I wanted to talk about there was a little bit of a hubbub on the Nexus involving the community recently. It involved certain types of mods that seem to be discriminatory in nature. They've since been taken down. Was that part of your department's doing?
Yeah, so as well as the three community managers, we obviously have our volunteer moderators. There's 13 of them at the moment, but they're not like contractually bound to do it because they volunteer. They do what they can when they can. So yeah, it was something that we dealt with. I mean, I know the controversy you're talking about. Essentially, some tit for tat mods got uploaded during the weekend on a very sensitive topic.
Right.
The decision essentially was just to remove all of them because they didn't really add any value and they were just causing offense and problems. One of the things we need to look at when we're looking at things like this, though, is kind of the intent, because someone could upload a mod that changes something in the game, and their intent wasn't to spark a controversy. It was just, here's my mod, I want to share this with you, and that's generally okay. But then you get the flip side of that, where you can kind of gather that the intent was a bit more malicious. And that's the kind of thing that isn't allowed ultimately.
And I guess that's where you rely on the user base to report what they believe to be a malicious intent, and then you can go in and investigate that. Is that right?
Yeah. So the important thing that is often lost in translation with moderation in general, Nexus Mods, is that we have a reactive moderation system, in that it's not physically possible to go through every piece of content on the site and check it. So we rely on the community to say, hey, this isn't right. This is what I feel is wrong with it. Can you have a look? And that's the reporting system.
Nexus Mods doesn't have something like a Facebook algorithm that can just automatically check for offensive keywords and such.
No, we don't have anything like that just yet. The closest you'll get to that is a bad word filter.
Right. I think I might have seen that when I've posted some of my comments before.
Yeah, some of the replacements for the bad words can be a bit amusing.
Now, we were talking earlier about right now part of your role being in QA, and something that Nexus Mods has got in testing right now is something called NexusMods Next. Now, can you describe to the listener that doesn't know what that is?
So NexusMods Next was a name that was coined by one of our developers, actually, because it's a new website essentially that runs off a technology called Next.js. We are using it as like a sandbox where we put new features of the site for testing, with the eventual aim to replace the site now with something more similar to what you see on NexusMods Next.
Interesting.
The current thing up there is our collection system, which you've probably heard about somewhere down the line.
Definitely. Is it in public alpha still?
Yeah, so we're calling the current phase open alpha, which essentially means that anyone who wants to test it is welcome to come and have a go, but it's not actually finished, so there will be missing features and bugs and things like that, potentially. So if you want to try it out, it's there, but we're looking for people to help us find the problems so we can make it better for the full release. That's where we're at this point.
That sounds good. So it's okay then. We'll put the Nexus Mods Next link in our show notes, and people. Yeah,
it's all public.
Perfect. And can you tell us how the collections testing is going?
So it's going pretty well. We've got some very good testers on board who've been giving us some really good feedback. It's you've got a good group of testers when it's not all positive or all negative. So we obviously get people saying, I like this is good, this has been really easy to use, but at the same time we're saying, well, I was trying to do this and I couldn't do it quite right, or it didn't behave as I expected. And it's been really good to go through that feedback and talk to the testers who've been trying it out so far. A few of the lessons we've kind of learned here will probably translate into changes to the mod system when we get we get around to that. Some of them that I'm quite interested in, such as we're going to be more closely tracking the version of the game you were using when you created your collection.
Okay.
That essentially came about thanks to Skyrim's Anniversary Edition update, which split the player base into 2 game versions ultimately.
Right, and the majority of people, it seems, are reverting.
I wouldn't say the majority. I mean, if you look at the downgrader tool that Halgari made, that gets quite a few downloads, but I would say that the only people who really even should download are people who either had a game in progress before the update, or people who absolutely need some of the mods that haven't yet been converted for the new version.
Well, I'll put myself in the camp of someone who is not downgraded. I'm at Anniversary Edition, and I'm fine being there. There's some SKSE plugins that I can't run, but it's not going to kill me to not run them.
Yeah, that's the thing with it. I mean, this is very reminiscent of when Skyrim Special Edition came out. There was obviously a divide between Legendary Edition and Special Edition. But now if you look at all the numbers, you'll see the trend is Skyrim Special Edition is still growing and Skyrim Legendary Edition is starting to tail off. I imagine the same will happen with this. Once I would say the majority of SKSE plugins are updated. There might be a few key ones that are a couple of versions behind now, though.
Along the lines of the collections, there's a bit of backlash originally and I imagine there's still some user base out there that are a little disgruntled at the idea. What is your opinion about collections and a little bit of the divide in the community in regards to it?
So, I mean, there's no skirting around it. There was some controversy around collections, mod lists, mod packs, whatever you want to call them. That kind of stems from some historic events, especially in the Skyrim community, that were not particularly positive in relation. I mean, that's kind of why our system is named collections, because we wanted to make it clear that it's not. So we differentiate a collection and a mod pack as 2 different things, ultimately.
Right.
Where a collection is basically just a fancy list that your mod manager can say, okay, I need to download these files and apply these conflict rules and this kind of thing. Whereas a mod pack would be more akin to the Minecraft mod packs, which is 1 download with everything in it.
Right. And this is more along the lines of, say, one author. Let's use JK's as an example, and he's got all his modifications to the towns or the interiors, and he puts them all together in a mod pack. I believe he has one up there. That's a great use for a collection.
Yeah, so I mean, I wholly expect authors like JK to create their own collections that are essentially just a list of their own mods with any relevant conflict rules already set for the users. I mean, you can also think about authors who create things like village mods or those kind of things to do a similar thing. And even you and I work on Legacy of the Dragonborn, so we could potentially make a collection that is a list of all the mods that can be used as add-ons with that. It's kind of cool. It just means that if you're new or inexperienced to modding, it removes some of the barriers for you to be able to play your game.
Yeah, especially if there's conflict rules and resolution patches built into the collection. That could ease your mind that it's not going to implode when you install all these mods, because it's sort of built around working together already.
Yeah, so as it stands, you can only create a collection and share it using Vortex, which is primarily because we want you to only export your working setup. And the best way for us to kind of funnel you down that path is that you need to have all the mods in your mod manager, which you'd like to assume that if you've got them all installed, then your setup works.
Right.
But as a point of clarification, because it comes up all the time, Vortex is required for our testing phase, but like everything Nexus Mods builds, we're gonna release the source code for it, and we're gonna have an open GraphQL API, which other tools are welcome to adopt if they want to offer collections to their users as well.
That's good to hear. As you know, I'm a Mod Organizer 2 user. I did download Vortex, and I played around with collections a little bit, because I need to see what it's all about. I may actually run a dual setup, because I'm going to need to know Vortex for my work.
Yeah, I mean, if with you being fairly experienced in the Skyrim community at the very least, it'd be interesting to see what your take on it is. I will say that Vortex is an incredibly powerful mod manager, but the things that I feel that we need to refine are some of the UI UX elements. So a lot of people are put off by the complexity of the dashboard and stuff like that, which the more feedback we get on that, the more we can figure out how we approach that and fix that problem.
The good thing about Vortex that Mod Organizer 2 doesn't have going for it is the fact that how many games it supports.
Yeah, so Vortex is incredibly, like, it was architected to be a mod manager for any game you could think of. So rather than being, I appreciate that tools like Mod Organizer have more recently expanded into other games, but Vortex was designed with the concept being that anyone can write an extension and they can automate the installation and deployment and update process for all mods. I'd make a lot of extensions myself, actually, and if I can do it, I think other people can do it.
One last thing, what does Pickysaurus like to do in his spare time outside of work?
So, I mean, it's probably fairly obvious being that I work for Nexus Mods, but I do play a lot of games. I tend to sort of gravitate to one or two games, play it to death, and then move on after a while. Skyrim is currently in hiatus for me because I've just played it to death at this point. I've been playing Halo Infinite, a little bit of Rocket League, just sort of casual little games.
I've seen Halo come up on your Discord status quite a bit lately.
Yeah, I've always been a massive fan of Halo. Although I was a bit let down with some of the more recent entries in the series and how long Infinite took to actually come out. But now it's out, I'm quite enjoying it.
Oh, that's great. Hey, I really appreciate you coming on and speaking with me today.
Well, thank you for having me.
All right, everybody, that's Pickysaurus, Community Manager at Nexus Mods, here on the SirJesto Podcast. We'll take a break for a message, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to the SirJesto Podcast. I'd like to give a shout out to ZoicZeph for creating my awesome logo and avatar. Zoic can be reached at her Ko-fi site, where you can commission some work from her, like I did. And her page is listed in the description, the show notes below. I've got no Ask Me Anythings this episode, so those of my supporters that I messaged about sending me some, make sure you get your questions in so you can appear on a future episode. Wherever you guys are listening to this, if you can subscribe, I want you to subscribe. That way you won't miss any of the awesome interviews I've got coming up. And once again, I'd like to thank Pickysaurus for joining me today. And we'll see you next time on the SirJesto Podcast. Bye for now.